Hey guys, welcome to today's mini workshop where we're going to show you how you can create a form by creating a mini app and a one-time URL. Then triggering another flow once the form has been submitted by the user. It's a really simple process, but a lot of you do not know how to create these kinds of mini apps, and that is exactly why we want to basically record this short mini workshop for you. So the first thing that you will need to do once inside your workspace is by going towards My Contents. From here, on the mini app section, we can create a new app. On this new app, we will go with mini app version 2 and let's say form generator, right? Let's press create and now we have created our mini app. That's it. No, it's not completely it, but we are already about 20% done. So let's go and edit this mini app. So the first thing that we will do is to generate a one-time URL. This is important because we can connect this towards a specific flow. So we will go towards the one-time URL first. Then we're going to press the button on the top right corner, new one-time URL. Give this a name. So let's say form. Let's say new form submission. Let's go with save. The choosing of subflow we will do a little bit later, but for now let's press the edit button. On the edit button you will see parameters and you can use this if you have more knowledge about this, but we are actually not going to map any data of the sorts inside of this specific mini workshop. What we are going to concentrate on is the web forms, and we are going to generate a few inputs for the user to submit a specific form, right? So we're going to go with the first input by pressing the button add item, and under the add item let's first go with a first name, going with a type of text, that's fine, and we're going to set this towards required. And now we are also going with the title. So the title is actually what will show up for the user. So let's go with the first name. And now we need to have an app field. Since we did not create any in advance, we can do so directly on the spot. So let's just go with a first name app field. Call this text. We will leave the description empty. And the only thing that we are going to do now is insert a placeholder. So let's say type your first name here. The showing of character limits, that is something that could be applicable when doing a password setup, for example, right? When generating a certain password, then you can do something like this. But for us, for our purpose today, we're going to leave as is. Going to press save. Once saved, we can do the exact same process for last name. So let's go with last name. Also going with a specific text field, and let's call this last name as well. Save it as a required field and then save it towards an app field called last_name. Go with a text and then the placeholder will be type your last name here and then press save. Let's do one more with an email. So let's just go with email, and this will also be text. And let's go with the email as title. This will also be required. And then also let's go with an app_email. We cannot use email directly because there is already a system field inside of UChat called email. So if I were to use email here, right, you will see that we get an error in the top right corner. So what we can do is just call this app email, or we could also say form email. Doesn't really matter as long as it's different than the existing system field. Let's go with text. There we go. Let's say save, and now let's go with a different kind of input. So let's say, for example, this would be a lead generation form, and we want to know if the user is an agency or just a freelancer, right? So let's go with something called business type, and let's make this a select. And now you will see that we don't have any select source. So in order to have a selection, basically a drop down with options, we first need to create a source. If we're going to save this, as you can see, we need to fill in a few data. So let's go and call this business type, and then save it towards an app field. Also set it towards required, but then save it towards an app field, business underscore type. There we go. Let's go with just a text field, that's fine. And now we have a placeholder. So let's just say, let us know if you are an agency or a freelancer. Let's press save. And let's save this one-time URL for now. First, we will need to create a source. A source basically means that we can provide an option inside of a dropdown, and it's really easy to make. So let's go and press the button new source. Under the new source, let's call this business type. There we go. And you have the option between dynamic and static. So static means that you can give your own static values, and dynamic could be pulled from a certain database into the mini app, or for example from a Google Sheet into the mini app and stuff like that. For this workshop, we're not going to go that advanced, we're just going with static values. Let's call this the same, let's call this just business type, and let's press save. Now we can edit this specific source. So if we say edit, we can now, as you can see, we cannot change the type anymore because we set it towards static, where we can add items. So for the label, let's just go with an agency and let's give the value the same, right? So as soon as the user presses agency, then we will get the same answer. Let's go with a freelancer. And let's call this the same. And let's just save the sources. Now we can go back towards that one-time URL and we can say edit. We can go back towards the web forms and now go inside the business type. And if everything went well, we are now being able to select a specific source that we just created. So if we press this drop down, then you will see that we have a source business type. Let's just select this and press save. Basically what we have now is also a preview, and you can also see that we do not have a preview for email inside the placeholder, and we actually left that empty. So let's say type your email here. So as you can see, we now have a good preview of what the user can expect when submitting a form. We can now press towards step number 3, which is the web page. Inside the web page, as you can see here, we can give it a title. So let's say something like thanks for submitting. And if we just go towards the next section, you will also see the preview inside of this mobile placeholder. Let's say something like thank you for submitting the form. You can close this window and go directly towards our chat, where we just sent the confirmation. There we go. You can also add an image if you like to. I will just keep it empty for now. And this will be basically the web page that will show. You can also set an URL expiry between anywhere from 5 minutes all the way up to 60 minutes. And you can also run a workflow, which we'll create in just a few seconds. But for now, let's just save this. There we go. The next step will be to also add a trigger. And the trigger will be that soon as the form has been submitted, that we need to map all those values from that specific form towards this trigger. So let's say form submitted, and let's go with the exact same for the title, form submitted. Let's press save. Let's go and edit this trigger. Under the edit section, we are now being able to have the context, as you can see here. If we say add context, we could say first name again, and then go with first name. And now we can map the value that we received from the form submission. So if we are going to press the drop down, you will see that we now have all those app fields available. So let's go with first name and let's replicate this process for all the other ones. Once done, you can also give a short description, basically something like user, something like map the user submitted form details into custom fields. Something like this, right? Once done, we can press the button save. And now we have created our trigger. Now that we set up the trigger, we need to set up the action. And the action will be, if we go towards a new action, let's say create new form. Let's say create new form, just keep everything the same, and let's press save. Inside, we will now be able to press edit, and inside we can select the type, which will be create. So we are going to create a new URL. We don't have any inputs because all the inputs will be given inside the form submission itself, but we do get an output because we want to generate a one-time URL. And then the one-time URL output will basically be a form, and let's call this form URL, and let's do the same for this. And since we do not have an app field for this yet, let's just call this form_URL. There we go. Let's just call this a text, press save, and that is everything that we need inside of this action. You can give it the guidance if you like to, but I will just leave it blank as is. Now that we have created this, we can also run the specific workflow. And the workflow we can set up really easily by going with a new subflow, workflow, and let's say we are going with generate new form URL. Let's say create. Perfect. Inside we're just going with an action. Inside this action we're going with the option get one-time URL. So let's press that. Let's press the edit action. And if all goes well, if we press the drop down, we should see our setup one-time URL. So let's take a look. As you can see, we have it. And now we can save the URL towards an app field. We just created one. So let's select the form_URL and press save. And this is basically everything that we need for this specific flow. We can now connect this flow towards that action. If we are going to say create new form, we're going to choose the generate new form URL. There we go. We're almost done. We just need to create one more workflow, and that is to basically enable the trigger, because we now have created the trigger, but to enable the forms being submitted towards this specific trigger, we need to be able to submit it towards a specific workflow. So what we are going to do here is we are going to create a new workflow and call this submitted form details. Let's go and create. And then inside, the only thing that we will need is an action. And this action will have a fire trigger. Inside this fire trigger, we have the form submitted action, right? There we go. We can now say publish. And now, as you can see here, we have a new form submission, and we can now select this specific trigger. So let's go with submitted form details. There we go. Soon as the user submitted their form details, then this workflow will run, and we can basically transfer all the data towards this specific workflow. So now that we have built our mini app, let's test it out inside the chatbot itself. So first we need to install this mini app. We can do so by going back towards the workspace. We can go all the way down towards my contents. My webcam might be in front, but just scroll down until you see my contents. And from here, we can go towards my mini apps and you will see the form generator popping up on the top. We can just say publish, and you can of course say submit for review, and then it will be published inside the official mini app store, or you can just use the draft version if it's for your own purpose or that of your clients. You can just copy the draft version URL, just pop it inside the tab or open a new tab, and then we can install this mini app. We can just say install, press save, and now we can use it inside of any bots. So let's go towards Omni-Channel in this case. I already set up 2 flows in advance under this specific form submission folder, but let's take a look. As you can see, no nodes have been created, so let's do that right now. We have a form submitted, which will be triggered by the trigger, and we have a get form URL, which will basically send towards the user, right? So let's say we're going with the get form URL. The only thing that we are going to do inside of this flow is to basically go with an action step. Inside this action step, we're going with integrations, and if we scroll all the way down, we now should see our mini app. So if we scroll down, you will now see a form generator. So let's say draft, let's say edit action, create a new form, and now we can map the form URL. You can map it towards any custom field that you like to. I believe I already have one called form_URL, so I'll use that one. And let's press save. Now we are going with a text message, and a really simple text message. Let's say submit form, please submit your details by pressing the button below. Let's go with a button. Inside this button, we are going with a submit now. For the next step, we are going with a website type. And inside the website address, we are going with the URL where we save the form URL. So let's go with form URL. Perfect. Let's choose native. That's fine. And then let's press save. There we go. Perfect. This flow has been set up, right? Now for the other flow, form submitted, we need to enable a trigger. And this trigger, you can create so in 2 different ways. We can either go towards automations, triggers, and then set up a new trigger here by pressing the drop down, or we can do that directly inside of the flow. So inside of the flow, we can just go with the starting node and then add the trigger here. If we scroll all the way down, we should also see this new trigger. Form generator, form submitted, right? Let's go with this one. Let's press it so we can edit the form or the trigger itself. We can enable it. There we go. And now we can map all the saved variables of that specific form that we created inside the mini app towards our own chatbot custom fields. So let's go with first name goes towards first name, last name go towards last name, email will go towards email, and business type, I already believe I have a custom field, as you can see, business type, and that's basically it, right? Let's say save, and what we are going to do now is just display all the data that we received from the user. So let's preview this flow and see what we get. So let's just open this inside of a web browser, just as easy. And now we can go and say, okay, please submit your details by pressing the button below. If we're going to press this, then we should see the generated form that we created inside the mini app. So let's take a look. It will open up a pop-up window, and now we can basically implement our data. So let's just go with John, and here we will have Smith. This will be John at smith.co. And now, as you can see, we also have a business type, and we have a drop down. How cool is this? You can also build your own drop downs, right? So let's just go, I'm a freelancer, and say submit. As you can see, thanks for submitting. Thanks for thank you for submitting the form. You can close this window and go directly towards our chat where we just sent the confirmation. So if all went well, the trigger has now been activated and the second flow with the overview of our data has now been shown. So if we are going to close this, you will now see, thank you for submitting your details. Here is the overview. First name, John, last name, Smith, email john@smith.co, and the business type is freelancer. How cool is this that you can create your own mini app within just a few minutes, generating all kinds of forms based on your needed input and not having to ask, in this case, for 4 different kinds of questions inside of a chatbot in order to get the same details. Once the details have been submitted, then you can basically activate the trigger to get all those details inside of the chatbot, inside of the custom fields that you prefer. So in general, this provides you with a much better experience than using countless questions, especially if you want to basically ask 10 or more questions. It's much easier for the user to submit a form, then go back towards the chatbot conversation to see the overview of their basically submitted data and then confirm it yes or no. So if you have any questions, do let us know, because we think this is a really convenient way of you creating also a really short and simple mini app to generate a form just like this one. Have a great day, take care, and talk soon.